Hello everybody, welcome to Big Bird Outdoors. My name is Nate, for those who haven't been here before, and today is the second installment of my crappie fishing tip series. And today I'm going over probably the second biggest thing to location, and that is your actual lure selection. So now we know how to find those fish based on the different seasons, where they'll be, if they're shallow, deep, all that different stuff. So I'll kind of go along that same line of looking at seasons and where they are, and then applying lures to that. And then specifically for this, I'm going to split it between location lures, so lures that you're using to locate the fish, and then your main presentation, so what you do when you find those fish. So we'll get right into the video. Stick around and let's learn some more about crappie fishing. Alright, so I got my two main boxes right here. You guys can't see them, but I'll be snagging stuff out of there. Actually, I need the other side on this one. So first we're going over your locating lures. So with crappie, especially when they're in the spring and the fall, it's definitely helpful if you go back to the last video and watch that before you watch this, because then you'll understand the positioning I'm talking about. So in the spring and fall, when those fish group up big and they're moving in big schools, or they get stuck on a spot in a big school, you can use locator lures pretty much exclusively, because if they're in that big of a school and you can find that main big school, you can just keep casting into them, and as long as they're hitting the lure you have, stick with it. Whereas in the summer, you're going to want to, in winter, it's harder, especially if you're an ice fisherman. I don't fish down south, so I can't really talk on that in the winter cooler months, even though it doesn't get too cold. But up here in the north, you're ice fishing, so that's a whole different animal. I'm not even going to go over that today. I'll probably do a separate video on just ice fishing for crappie. So when we're looking for locator lures, one thing a lot of guys look for are bigger fish. So when you're doing that, I'll go with a big paddle tail. This is just the one I grabbed. This is 3-inch. I like smaller tails though, because it gives them a little something to swallow. Sometimes you get the ones with the bigger tails, those medium-sized fish will kind of stay off of it, and just the big fish will grab it. But I've had 8-9-inch fish grab a 3-inch paddle tail just on a little 16th-ounce jig head, and you can cast that all around you. Here's same thing, 3-inch. There's a bigger tail one, but they'll still hit it. That's on a bigger jig head, 1/8. Another great locator is underspins, little small ones. So this one with this one's absolutely crapped out, but with the feathers is about 2 inches long. Nice silver underspin. Same thing with this one. This one's a grub with a little grub tail with a spinner. And I'll go over colors at the very end, actually. So I'm going to kind of talk about the types of lures, and then I'm going to go colors. So for now, just underspins, bigger paddle tails, like I said. You can use smaller paddle tails if you're in an area without too many big fish. Small spinner baits, basically the tiny little, the Acme ones you can find a lot of the times. I think Meps make a spinner bait, but small spinner baits with little plastics on the bottom, you know, little paddle tails, little grub tails, stuff like that. Those work great for locating. And then the final locating one, or actually I have two more, is little tiny crankbaits. These are great when they're in mid to shallow water and you want to get them to come up, especially in that fall time. You want them to come up. Whereas those other ones you can use in the summer especially, and get them to sink and get down deep. So yeah, stuck myself. And then little tiny ones. This is a sweet pea crank. I've caught just about every fish in the Northeast on that. I don't remember the name of this little guy. It's another one of my favorites. Little 2-foot depth diver. And then spinner baits and metals. Inline spinners, not spinner baits. Inline spinners. Little size 1, size 2 aglias. Very good for dark water when you want a lot of flash. And then just normal metals. So little Johnson silver spoons. Al's goldfish, Phoebes, any little metal. And like I said, if you notice there, I showed a bunch of silver, so that'll be one of the colors I talk about later on. So now you found the fish, and this becomes really important in the summer, when a lot of the time they're in those concentrated schools and they're moving down an edge. I'll talk about boat position later on. That'll probably be the next installment of this series before ice fishing. So when you get in the summer, when you get over the top of those fish and you're trying to be specific, I fish almost everything exclusively on jig heads, exclusively soft plastics. And then I got 3 main bodies that I fish. So paddle tails still, you can jig those great, especially if you get the little tiny paddle tails and they flitter a lot as they fall. Then you can skip them up and they pull. You can let it hit the bottom and slowly reel it back to you off the structure so it paddles out. The next one, my personal favorite, is flick shads. So it's that little flick tail. These are great because if you're flipping onto docks, you're right over a big rock pile, right on an edge, drifting down it, you can drop that straight down and just flick it as you go along. And that flick tail, you can see I literally just held it up. You can shake my hand, it's really sensitive. So any tiny movement you put in the rod, it's gonna flick that tail all around. So when we fish it, we get it down the bottom, and I'll talk about this more in a later video, and we literally just shake it. Like, you just shake your hand and that flick tail will do those little things. Looks like a nice little hurt bait fish. Then the final of my 3 main presentations are curl tails. Talked about that with the underspin. That's a personal favorite on the underspin, paddle tails and curl tails. But they're also great when you're jigging. Again, just another little jig head. I usually like to stay in the 1 to 2.5 inch range. Sometimes bump it up to 3. Like, we'll bump up with the paddle tails. There's a 2 inch on a little bit bigger of a jig head. But generally you want to stay in that. And then another one that I don't fish much, but a lot of people do, and I've had some decent luck on them, are tubes. So it's a simple tube, put it through on the jig head. I might have one rigged up in here. Nope, I don't. But those are just, when you're on fish, you want to fish, I personally, soft plastics and just simple jigging straight up and down. Again, we'll get into that later when I'm talking about boat positioning and specifically how to fish it. But when you have the fish located, after you've used some of those locator lures to find them, you can start going through those positional lures, and you can find exactly what they want. Say they want a paddle tail at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's fine. An hour later, they kind of slow down on that. You can flip to a curl tail, maybe with a different color, and they'll start hitting that. So it's just kind of a game of, once you find the fish, you know they're there. You can see them on your electronics. You've located them. You've caught 3 or 4 fish on locator lures, and you hunker down. You can start sifting through those baits and just figuring out exactly what they want. So now, colors is a thing. If you go like to bass fishing guys, they go crazy. It's just every color in the book, every perfect little tiny detail is key to the water. With crappie, I'm not saying throw it out the window, don't just get rid of it, but it's a lot easier. So when you saw me holding up all those metal lures, it's pretty simple. Silver. Almost exclusively silver. Anything that looks like a bait fish, a crappie will hit, especially when it's the spring and fall and they're grouped up in these big groups and just hammering bait, or they're on a very specific spot or edge in the summer and they found a big bait school. If you can throw something that just looks like a bait fish, they will almost hit it every single time. If you can find the fish and give them something that looks like a bait fish, they will hit it. So for that reason, as you saw as I went through my lures, I love white, I love silver and gray focus, there we go, and it's got like a silver fleck in it. Even the tubes, even though they're black and blue up top, they got the silver and translucent tentacles, that's what they're called. Paddle tails, I go either straight white or white with a chartreuse tail. Those are my 2 personal favorites. Another one is nuclear chicken, or what else do they call it? Electric chicken, that's what it is. So this side, pink and green, focus. Yep, so pink and green curl tail, or just pink and green in general. I use pink and green on paddle tails as well a lot, or flick shads. Flick shads are a great one, so these little guys with the flick tail. They're great to get in a lot of different colors, especially because they're very good, where you can use them almost universally. You can drop them straight, you can flick them out and pull them off. And you can get them in a lot of colors, and you can dye them your own colors. So you can get silvers, straight whites, gray and white, white with silver fleck. You can get pink and chartreuse, like the curl tail I just showed you. And they're personally my favorite. If I had to go with one, it would be flick shads. And then final colors is just something real bright, just to get their attention. Every once in a while, you'll find a lake where they'll hit the white or they'll hit the silver. They almost always do, because it's an easy to see color. But sometimes you just want to switch it up, and they'll hit something big and bright, like orange and yellow, like I just showed you. So color, you don't have to be too specific, just as long as what you're showing them looks like a bait fish. And if I had two go-to colors, silver and white. Alright, so I want to thank everybody for watching. If you did not see the previous video, which is all about locating crappie throughout the different seasons, you're definitely going to want to go back and look at that. It'll help you understand this a little better, because I threw in some of the different seasons in there. If you like the video, obviously go ahead, like it, comment, and then subscribe, so then you can see all my new videos coming out. You can see the next installments of this series. There's going to be 2 more. Like I said, one about the boat and how you fish, and then one about ice fishing specifically and what I do on the ice for crappie. So subscribe for that. Stay tuned, and I'll see you guys next time on Big Bird Outdoors. Peace.